you doing?
I'm doing really well. Yeah, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm good. I was just on annual leave on vacation for a bit, so I was out of the country, but I'm back in the UK now. And you and I, for the listeners, the context here is that we were kind of talking about scheduling and when are we going to be able to do the next episode. And also we talked a little bit about our overlapping sort of areas of expertise and interest. And Andy and I both realized we really wanted to do a Dreamcast episode, and I think Nate is totally fine with stepping out of that. I don't really think that was his thing, so we just thought, let's try and do this little mini episode interlude, see where it goes, and maybe we could do future ones as well, because I know, again, myself and Nate have other interests that overlap. Obviously, I'm the common element here. Like I said, I'm the radiant sun on this trifecta.
That's right. Yeah.
No, but I mean, just by the accident of knowing both of you as like the link, we kind of talked about that. But it could be something that develops down the line as sort of half episodes in between things. So yeah, so we had the idea of chatting a little bit about the Dreamcast, which is to me a really dear system, and I imagine to yourself as well.
The best. Oh yeah, no, it's honestly my favorite console, like still, which is kind of bizarre.
No, it's not bizarre at all. Did you actually, were you part of the kind of the hype when it came out and the whole process through to the end?
So I'm 29, which means I was 10 when the Dreamcast came out. I grew up with the Genesis, and then I got an N64 and then a PlayStation. I didn't have a Saturn. I didn't have a Sega CD. I didn't have a 32X. And I remember when the Dreamcast came out, I was like sort of vaguely excited, but I felt kind of burned by Sega. I wasn't burned, but I knew like they kind of burned other people. But I was like, oh, maybe I'll get one eventually. And then I ended up picking up one in like June of 2000. So it was like maybe about 7 months after it came out, or no, more than that, like about 10 or 11 months after it came out.
Yeah.
And it was just really cool. Like it came with Crazy Taxi, the bundle I had.
Oh, classic.
And that was just it was unbelievable. Like that experience of playing Crazy Taxi, and I had like the demo disc, and I had Sonic Adventure, and I really just fell in love with this console. I love the VMU. I never played it online until like 6 months ago with the Dream Pie stuff.
Oh man!
But,
we're definitely gonna have to get into that. Can I ask? Do you remember what was on the demo disc?
So it was I think it was like the first one that they packed in still. So it had House of the Dead 2, it had Sonic Adventure, it had, I guess you look it up real because I think I remember the name of it.
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious.
Like, on the fly.
I'm kind of curious because there's I think it's an interesting, as an aside, a little bit of lost gaming history sometimes is those demo discs and little kind of shareware things if you go even further back. And there's actually a few YouTube channels I follow where they do, is it ADG or Pixel Amusement? One of these guys, I'll find the link, where they just dig. They have like a Patreon community where they find demo discs and they mine them for just even if they're
awesome.
Even if they're horrible, they just to figure out kind of what was on there. So I'm just kind of I'm thinking about what would have been on an early DC demo disc.
So it looks like Sonic Adventure, House of the Dead 2, Power Stone. I remember playing a lot of. It was just literally like a one level demo.
Yeah.
I just kept doing it over and over. It had like Monaco.
Okay.
Sega Flag to Flag, so just some like racing stuff too.
Yeah, okay.
It had like the crappy like video footage too.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I myself, we're the same age actually. So I had a similar kind of like I was less of a Sega person, but it was on my radar obviously, and I had followed it, but I never owned one. And in my tried and true tradition for a lot of systems, I think it was mostly Nintendo systems that I consistently would buy on release up until the GameCube. But with everything else, like my first PlayStation, I might have mentioned in another podcast, I was, towards the end, I think the PS2 might have already come out, and I found a really cheap, PS1, like the really small light gray one, and bought a copy of that in Chrono Cross, and I was like, all right, I'm ready to explore the PS1. And the same thing happened to me for Dreamcast, and it was actually a great opportunity because of my older brother's friend. He was kind of like, the sun was setting for him on the Dreamcast, and speaking of piracy, which we're definitely going to talk about later, he gave me just like a cardboard box full of CDRs, and I bought a Dreamcast, and just like he gave me this box, and that was another really interesting experience of sort of not just exploring the catalog, but exploring this particular person's catalog. So that was kind of my entry point, and it was basically a dead system to me. I mean, I think it must have been long after 2001, or that was about the sunset of the system, wasn't it?
Oh, definitely, yeah. Because I remember they announced it. It was like January 2001. Like the thing was like on market, less than a year and a half, and I was like kind of like a dead ender with it. I was like, no, Dreamcast forever. So I think actually I imported like the PAL version of Shenmue 2.
You know what? I always regret never having done that, and I even to this day have a copy of Shenmue 2 for the Xbox that I bought.
I was a dumbass. And I sold it later because I'm like, it sold for like $80. Yeah, and like I regret doing that because it was a cool, like, I was a teenager, it was like $80 at the time. I was like, oh my god, I'm like rich, but now I'm just like, why did I do that? It was such a cool, like, commemorative thing almost, you know?
Well, I do think, I mean, just starting out that I know that's been said to death, but I think we kind of underestimate. It's often talked about just as a nostalgia system or whatever, but having played on these other consoles for a while, when I made the shift to the Dreamcast late, I was sort of like, whoa, is this what I've been missing the whole time? Like, to this day, I think more so than almost any other system of its time, because this is like, we're talking like pretty much pre-PS2 here. Like, it's sort of coming up on that era. Like, there's just no comparison between the actual, the graphical capabilities and the smoothness of the platform. I was coming from, playing N64 and stuff like that, and I already thought that was more smooth than the PlayStation. So to see this was like, it just blew my mind. And that was late.
Yeah, and I think there's just something really interesting about the graphical capabilities of the Dreamcast. There's almost like I don't really know what to call it, almost like a house look, I guess, to the games where they have like that super smooth, it's very distinctive.
Those even beautiful 3 million pixels per second or whatever.
It's like,
Well, I was going to say then, I mean, for me also, so obviously just the initial look, grabbed you. I think the controller, again, what can be said about the controller? It's a bit of a clusterfuck, as much as the VMU might have been a sort of an interesting thing. But the games also, like, I got hooked on a few. And, to be honest, when I was thinking of this episode, I went into some lists online. I looked up the Racket Boy lists, which tend to be quite good. They do best underrated games for X, and they'll like, whatever the console is. And I realized looking through, I was like, wow, there's so many of these titles I don't recognize that I haven't played, and it made me think about wanting to delve into it again. But even just some of the basic ones, like you mentioned, Power Stone, coming from playing Smash Brothers and loving Smash Brothers, Power Stone to me was like, it was a bit lighter, but it was a revelation. I pushed that game so hard on my friends. Like, I would bring my Dreamcast over, and we'd play Power Stone 1, Power Stone 2, and I think they were a bit random. I don't know if the skill level was super high, but it was such a fun, like, home arcade experience, which I think that's the thread running through a lot of these games, that Capcom versus SNK, Marvel versus Capcom, Soul Calibur, even the Crazy Taxis in these, is that full, like, the first time that arcade experience really seems to be better at home than in the actual arcade,
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, the arcade ports are just, they're incredible. I mean, I was playing Dead or Alive 2 last week, which is just, I was kind of sitting next to my girlfriend playing. I'm like, man, outside of like the really horrible sexism, this is like an awesome game. And we were both because it's like so terrible, but the actual engine is so fun. Yeah. And I'm kind of surprised more games didn't riff on like throwing people out of windows and making like a more dynamic fight.
Right.
Yeah.
Like the arena changing and stuff like that.
Yep.
Yeah. I remember that going back to the Clay Fighter on the N64. But so what were sort of your standbys, I guess, on the Dreamcast? I mean, when you think about the system, because I'm Power Stone, some of these party games are definitely starting out, but I have my standbys. What are some of yours?
Mine were always Jet Grind Radio.
Oh my god, I can't believe I didn't even think of that.
That's like the one.
That is the one. That is.
Yeah, that's like the
to rule them all.
Dreamcast game. Yep. Yeah. Crazy Taxi. I got into Crazy Taxi 2 like a lot later. I actually burned a copy of it.
Yeah.
Probably in my 20s, but that's a really cool sequel too.
Yeah.
And then like MVC 2 and I honestly the original Sonic Adventures. I played it so much as a kid. It's flawed, but
yeah, I actually got a lot of. Again, I think there is a benefit to missing the hype train a bit. Whereas now I'm finding myself, and we've all talked on the podcast about being in this Switch era where I'm like, oh, the new game and Octopath Traveler comes out, this game comes out, and we're like, we got to play this. There is this nice thing that I've always enjoyed about missing the hype train, and because I was never this diehard Sonic fan, I was able to approach the Sonic Adventure games totally as a blank slate. I'd played the games and I liked them well enough, but I really enjoyed them, and to me it was just like a wow experience of seeing it in this 3D. They were also so glitchy. I remember I never could beat Sonic Adventure 2 because of a level where Tails kept falling through the floor, and I just got so frustrated where I was like, dude, I see the exit and I can't get through this. So I was like, I screw this. But I never really replayed the remakes on GameCube, so I don't know if they fixed that kind of stuff. But
I feel like they did a little bit. I never got around to those either, though.
Yeah. But I think that what you're saying, that house style and also some of that house cheesiness. I mean, those games with like the sound, that first level when you're running down the like almost perpendicular San Francisco like streets, and that follow me, that really cheesy track is playing in the background. I ate that up completely.
Yeah, it's a fun game, honestly. Like when it's good, it's really good.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of what else.
Did you play Choo Choo Rocket?
I later on, like that's something I got. I think I bought a copy, like again, like when I was like older, I was like in my 20s.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, how did I miss this?
Yeah. Like, no, I think
it's a great game.
Yeah, I'm to this day, and I could be wrong because I'm noticing as I since I kind of skipped a little while a kind of mini generation with all the indie titles that I'm just now learning about on the Switch. Maybe it's been matched. I've seen some pretty wild party games out there, but I don't know. To me, I still think Choo Choo Rocket is one of the best party games of all time, and it's normally thought of as just a puzzle game, but it was designed by the Sonic team, and it's nothing like Sonic, but they had some that razor sharp mind for what they were trying to do. And in the 4-player party mode, I mean, I don't really know many other games that have that premise of you're taking a game, you're taking the same ideas of just placing down arrows, moving your mice into the rockets, trying to get the most points, but there's 4 people doing it at once, which just makes for complete madness. And then you add the roulette stuff and everything else. Like I want that. I want Choo Choo Rocket 2 now.
Yeah, I love Choo Choo Rocket so much. Like there's an iOS port that
is there. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think they like got rid of it though. Like it was like one of those App Store things where they had it up for a few years and they got rid. Yeah, it was so annoying. But
it would be interesting to see if there was any, because I never even thought kind of just in Japan releases, like if it ever continued outside of that. But
maybe yeah.
But yeah, so Choo Choo Rocket, one of the finest puzzle games ever in my opinion. There's, what was I gonna say? I actually didn't play as deeply into this, but the Soul Reaver game that was on there. Did you ever play?
I never got around to those. I always wanted to.
Yeah,
they seem like cool, like almost like Metroid-y from what I've seen.
Yeah, just the third-person action adventure stuff, but just again, compared to what it was the sequel of, just so much more beautiful, so much more crisp and interesting. We talked about Power Stone, which is awesome. we didn't talk about Shenmue, which we've mentioned it a little bit. We've briefly touched on it, but like
it's really fun because I've been replaying it on the HD. Yeah, it's really fascinating to play it in 2018.
Yeah.
The remaster is very lightly. I mean, I'm kind of glad it ended up this way. I don't think they had like a lot of money to throw at it because like it's very bare bones. Like they just like upped the visual quality. I think they added some like bloom lighting.
Yeah.
Added like a right camera stick thing, and that was it. But like, I'm glad they did that because it holds up kind of weirdly well.
Yeah.
I was mentioning to you in a conversation prior, it reminds me a lot, looking back, of these almost like walking simulator games. Like Gone Home or Firewatch, where you're just like living in this world. And I keep saying to everyone I'm talking to about this game that I love this game. I keep wanting to play it, and I don't really know why.
Yeah.
Like, there's like nothing really compelling. Like, it's like not compelling, but it's like incredibly compelling at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's just like a weird, like melancholy tone to it that I love.
I think that is, and I think, you know, when I that's a good word for it, melancholy, because the other word I was gonna say was the ennui of it is actually weirdly appealing. And when I think about modern open world games, and I think about, well, what, you know, why do I like Shenmue, or what is so different about it? You know, in these games, they're bigger and they have more granular detail and all this. There is something about the what Shenmue is trying to evoke is something closer to a novel, I would feel, than like The Witcher 3 or something, which maybe that's closer to a fantasy novel, but it's, you know, it's an adventure story, it's a grand tale. And Shenmue really is about these like ineffable, you know, slice of life kind of moments. And as quaint as it might feel for maybe modern gamers, I remember that was the killer app for me. When I did get the Dreamcast, just like I got Chrono Cross for the PlayStation, and I was like, this is going to hold me down for a while. I got Shenmue for the Dreamcast and the box of pirated games, and I sat down with my like Chinese cracker things that I was fond of at the time, and just that's what I did. And I think it sort of connects a little bit to what I was on about on that blog post from before about the idea of idleness in games, is that Shenmue is a game that feels great to idle in, you know, to have no purpose in, to just be in and walk around. Yeah.
It forces you to idle too, which is kind of fascinating. Like, I know the second game got rid of that because it's like, you know, do you want to speed up when the store opens or something? But like the first game, like you're stuck. Like, you know, it's like, okay, I can't get to this bar until 5 hours from now in game, so I guess I gotta like go
putz
to
around.
The arcade. I gotta just putz around and talk to random people and see what's going on with them.
So how does the second one, because I've never played the second one, I'm looking forward to it on the collection, but so you're saying it kind of answers that by giving you the ability to skip sections or speed them up, or
so it, from what I remember, I haven't gotten to it in the remaster, but I remember, like, let's say you needed to go to a store or something like that, or a certain location, you had to wait for a specific character, it would say, you know, would you like to speed up time by X amount of hours? And it would just like run the clock for you almost.
Okay. No, that's a good quality of life thing. It loses some of that rough around the edges quality of the first one. But it is interesting to think too that, like, you know, this game came out of like a Virtua Fighter experiment, you know, that they're messing around with this engine, and then 10 years later, however many years later, they end up with this thing. I'm really looking forward to that. Jet Set Radio, or Jet Grind, as you mentioned, is amazing, and I only briefly played the Xbox version, but my biggest gripe with that one was it was too easy to do the graffiti. You know, you just press the buttons. God, whereas in the Dreamcast one, you had to do the curves. Yeah,
I'm actually not. It's kind of a weird take, but I'm really like not a fan of the Xbox one. Like, I think part of it too is like that's part of why I got an Xbox was like that game, and I played.
Really?
Like, oh man, more Jet Set Radio! Oh my god! And then I was like,
Yeah.
oh no, like like there's no time limit. Like there's like the arcadey kind of feel to it's gone. Yeah, so it was just.
The soundtrack is also an interesting, because I actually have listened to the soundtrack a lot just because I like the first one so much, and that's another interesting. There's some bangers on there, and there's also some really bizarre tracks. But that is, talk about, if we're in an era of nostalgia dipping. I mean, that's a franchise that's just waiting for somebody to do a third installment.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm looking at, I thought maybe to help us a little bit, since we're just gushing right now, I thought if we look at, I have a few different lists here. So I have like kind of like a more generic one, and then I have an underrated list. So I thought maybe we could kind of breeze through some of these and just see. This also might, I mean, for me, this is exploratory because, like I said, I've played a decent chunk of Dreamcast games, but I'm looking through these and I'm like, I totally forgot about this. Number 25 on this list, the top 25 Dreamcast games, is a game called Silver. Have you heard of this one?
Oh, I've heard that. It's like an RPG deal. Right?
Yeah,
like top down. Yeah, I played that.
It actually, I'm looking at a screenshot and I'm kind of enchanted just looking at it. I have a very high, since you can tell from the intro music, Dragon Quest VI, I have a very high tolerance for tedious RPGs. So it doesn't necessarily matter if it's not an amazing game. I will totally play it. Okay, so that's Silver. We've got Seaman. This is one that I've really wanted to try. I know that got panned a lot by people, but just as an experiment.
Yeah, I actually almost, I was thinking about buying that, like not that like last year, because I actually found a way to hook my Dreamcast up to like my high def TV, involving like the VGA cable, and it goes into like a HDMI switch box, and then it's like this like fucking Frankenstein thing. I was like, I'm gonna make it work somehow, so I did it, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go back and buy some of these games, and we had to buy the microphone. It's like such a pain. Because you could buy the microphone like fairly easily. It's like kind of pricey, but it's not bad. But then there's like the foam, like the actual thing that you like plug into the microphone extension, and that's like hard to find nowadays without them being like either mangled or like And I'm just kind of annoyed. I remember like back in like 2003, 2004, you couldn't give this stuff away. Like they were dirt cheap. They were all like $10, and like, oh my god.
Yeah, that's a shame. I'm reading about it now, and I didn't realize that apparently Leonard Nimoy is narrating this
narration.
Game. Yeah. Oh what is wrong? I need to be on this. What is happening?
What is wrong with us? Yeah.
Yeah, this is ridiculous. Okay, so Seaman, I've always been interested, partially because it seems like games like today, like Viva Pinata and these kinds of like weird, Uber Tamagotchi style games owe that and Seaman a bit in their legacy. Here's one, Illbleed. Have you heard of this one?
Yeah, that's another one I've always wanted to play. It's like a horror amusement park. Yeah,
that looks really cool.
Burn that.
Yeah. Typing of the Dead. I've played that. That's silly and classic.
So awesome.
Yeah. I think I must have played a PC thing because I never had the extension for the Dreamcast. Virtua Tennis. That is a solid game.
Incredible. Yeah.
That is as close as you're gonna get me to playing a sports game that doesn't have magical powers or like monsters in it.
Yeah, no, it's really good. The sequel is really cool too because you could do like they had like female players.
Okay.
And
nice.
I think just something worth mentioning about Virtua Tennis is just how in depth the World Tour mode is.
Really?
Where it's like so it has like there's like mini games. It almost has like a Crazy Taxi deal where there's like mini games that train your character. And then you put them through tournaments and they level up. It's sort of like a vaguely RPG-ish system.
Wow, that's been a really long time since I played it. That's interesting. The next one here is a shmup here. It looks like Mars Matrix. Have you played that?
Not that one specifically, no.
Okay. I know Ikaruga is on here somewhere, so we'll get to that. Choo Choo Rocket, of course. We've got Metropolis Street Racer.
That's a cool one.
Yeah, I did a dabbling around with like the different the different racing games on the Dreamcast, but because it's not really my wheelhouse or my genre, they're all a blur to me. Dead or Alive 2, classic. Grandia 2, which I must have played like the first 5 seconds of, but I didn't really play. But I'm actually looking forward to the Switch release a lot, so I'm
incredibly excited about that. Yeah.
House of the Dead, Headhunter. This looks like a Metal Gear Solid knockoff.
Yep, that was like a really hyped game in like 2001, and I played it. It was all right, but it was kind of like a clunky third person. Yeah.
Power Stone 2. Of course, Samba de Amigo. That is freaking awesome. Did you play Samba de Amigo?
Oh no! I gotta get. The problem is those controllers, man.
I know. It's so good though. That soundtrack. I was really. Full disclosure, I was really into the whole DDR kind of scene when I was younger, and any rhythm game, like I'd be listening to the extremely unlistenable soundtracks way before I even played the games. So Samba de Amigo was up there for me. We got Jet Set Radio, of course, Ikaruga, which was awesome. I felt like before it was actually cool to be this. I felt really cool for having played Ikaruga before a lot of people when it came out on the GameCube.
That's like one of the first games that I burned was it was Ikaruga, but it actually turned out to be like this like homemade like shmup collection that someone put together.
Oh,
so
nice.
It was like Gunbird 2, Ikaruga, Zero Gunner 2, and one other, I forget what. It was like so cool.
Nice.
It was like all like Japanese, like this like weird, like almost like web browsery looking like windows and stuff to click through. It was so good.
So we got Rez, which is also amazing.
One of my favorites.
Yeah.
That got a hell of a remaster last year or the year before.
Is it?
I think. Yeah, it's VR.
Oh wow. Which actually sounds perfect.
No, it's awesome. So they added like a new level that was designed in VR that has a very different graphical quality, which is kind of interesting.
Okay.
And it's like free roaming almost.
Oh, nice.
But it's really weird. Yeah, but the like main game is so cool in VR.
Nice.
Like,
Crazy Taxi 1 and 2, of course. Resident Evil Code Veronica. Resident Evil was never my series, but I've seen people playing this one, and it looks good enough.
It's one of the better older ones.
Yeah. Marvel vs. Capcom 2, Phantasy Star Online. This one is like I wish I was the kind of person who played. I played PC games online, but I didn't even occur to me to try and play a console online.
Yep.
Until
me too.
The modern era, and seeing the swan song here for the series, and the way people talk about it, and even the fans today still running these like hacked servers. It's pretty cool.
It's a scene, man. Like that Dream Pie stuff is no joke. So Dream Pie is really weird.
Tell me about it. Tell me about it.
Basically, I kind of stumbled on this somehow, like on Facebook or wherever, and it was a group of fans that they basically took a Raspberry Pi computer, coded some kind of program on it that simulated a modem, and then ran. They created like a volt. Oh my god, I forgot the name of it. It's basically something to simulate a volt being run. So the whole thing basically simulates a dial-up modem, which is kind of insane. And you could buy a pre-made kit by this guy, and he'll send it to you. I think it's like maybe, I forget, maybe like $60 to $80 for like the whole thing, or not even maybe. But and it came, and I brought my Dreamcast online for the first time in like 2018.
That's amazing.
Which is incredible. And I tried to play PSO, but I couldn't get something running on it at the time. I think I had like a setting that was triggered or something. But I took it online. I downloaded like DLC from like almost 20 years ago. So you could, like, they have like the Crazy Taxi DLC you can download. You could download, I think, some of the Sonic Adventure stuff that they did for like holidays.
Oh wow!
Because all that is just files that you download to your memory card.
Right. Okay.
So it was kind of cool. And then something happened with mine where I think I was emailing the dude back and forth, and he determined that like my SD card that's in it became corrupted.
Okay.
So I just have to like reset it and play around with that. I haven't
Right.
gotten a chance to. But
If we can, if this results in us having like a play these things like Dreamcast Club, I'm gonna be so, because this
oh my
actually
God, yes.
this didn't even occur to me, like, because you told me a little bit about this, but now that you're saying this, I see that I could see the mountaintop here where we have
it gets better too.
yeah.
Now, not only that, but these people have been bringing back games online. Like, so they're going back and doing like, weird hacks of servers
Right.
and like patchy type things. So they just brought back at 2K1.
Oh wow.
Like some of the old sports games.
Yeah.
They brought back. I could just go to the website and tell you it's like bizarre.
Yeah. Maybe, you know what, I wanted to save this, but and maybe we could go into it more later, but I have to say that this is so sort of like in preparation for this episode, I was thinking to myself, what are the standard narratives about the Dreamcast? And one of those narratives, as we were saying before we started, is, it was so easy to pirate that that is what ended up killing it. And that didn't sit well with me. It hasn't sat well with me ever. But I was like, all right, so like let me do some research into this, because even just before you know anything, if you just read it kind of textually, you're already seeing the usual tropes of like the company is like this individual that's being robbed of their of their greatness and whatever, and you're thinking like, okay, so what I already know about copyright law and like downloading and in the music industry and things like that is that there isn't really empirical evidence that downloading substantively affects sales and things like that. But I'm like, okay, let me humor this and let me research this. And I found a lot of really interesting stuff. The first thing was a few reviews of this book, Console Wars, which does seem to be a bit of a hit or miss book. With maybe it's got some issues. The guy seems to take some liberties with journalistic integrity there. So he kind of quotes people out of context, and there's a few debates on there. But some of the substance of what the book was talking about was the kind of the zeitgeist at the time that the system was coming out. And the main point I was taking away from reading about this was not only was the Dreamcast the most successful system for Sega in a long time, that they were kind of ending on a high note. Now, they were kind of reading the writing on the wall, but the idea that I think is really interesting, because you can find we're in an era, and we're part of this in a sense, but we're in an era where a lot of people like us are coming of age and making YouTube channels and making these media things, and what I'm amazed at as an incredibly lazy person who's dabbled in journalism, I'm amazed by the complete lack of any journalistic standards from a lot of these things, because you'll watch these channels. I was watching DC retrospectives kind of in preparation for this, and over again you hear this thing of like, and we all know that Piracy Killed the Dreamcast, and every single time I kept being like, where's the source? Like, just name one source, please.
Yeah, like,
and they
name one thing.
Exactly, and they all seem to cite each other basically. So the more I was looking into it, so you have them ending on a high note. You have Sega going through a series of kind of botched deals of, that some would argue potentially missing out on what would become, the future deals that made PlayStation 2 popular, that made the Xbox what it was, and all the, failing when Microsoft was gonna maybe buy them out because they didn't agree with certain licensing things for online, all kinds of things. But yeah, even with these mistakes, the general sense that you get is that they're seeing the PS2 is coming. It's this juggernaut. It has a DVD player. It's becoming a home DVD player for most people. People who don't even play games. We can't compete with this, and we're going to become a software company primarily. And this narrative about piracy having been the killer actually starts cropping up a bit later. So it's really interesting to me, because we look at it now retroactively like, oh, this is what happened. But if you look at what was being talked about at the time, what were the major factors at the time, what was being discussed by people in the industry at the time, I mean, this is this is what I wanted to bring up is you have things like Bleem. Do you remember Bleem?
Oh my God, yeah, I always wanted to get into that. Yeah,
yeah. There's a amazing article on Eurogamer, I think it is, and a few other places, but there's one about the history of Bleem, and it's actually so fascinating and so telling about where we are in games, because this is a company which it went toe to toe a bit with for Sony.
I'm surprised.
And then,
I should have mentioned that to you because I know you're really interested in piracy. I think I actually read the same Eurogamer article like not that long ago. Yeah,
no, it's a great piece because
wild.
Because you think about, they went toe to toe with Sony a little bit, so it's definitely it wasn't a completely open playing field, but this was still a time in which they ended up getting pretty major coverage and market penetration with other companies, and Sega themselves eventually coming on board and agreeing to run basically an emulator, officially sell an emulator for their console, which is like, you would think is counterintuitive. By today's logic, you'd think like, oh, they're opening the door for piracy. But actually, and I'll put the link, of course, in the notes, but there were some really good quotes from some of the people who helped create Bleem that resonated with me in terms of their kind of their philosophy of games, where they saw themselves as we're actually doing these companies a favor because we're going to open up we're going to open up the PC to play PlayStation games. We're going to open up the Dreamcast to play PlayStation games, and that's going to mean people can buy and play PlayStation games regardless of if they have the system or not. So we're actually opening it up. And their vision, there was a quote here from the thing that said, to the Bleem team, the format for content delivery was of relative unimportance. It was the right to play content as the owner saw fit that they were striving toward. And I thought that was a really interesting, that was the time that this was happening in. And so, and the argument is kind of made that on the backs of the Bleem lawsuits and on the Connectix, which was a previous attempt at a PlayStation emulator, commercial one, on the backs of those lawsuits is what the modern kind of DMCA DRM approach comes from, is the panic from the companies around the experiment with, and then the subsequent panic with this whole experience, and to think about where would it have gone if it had gone in a different direction.
Right.
It's just, I don't know, it's really interesting to me. So to me, from what I have understood, there isn't empirical evidence that piracy is what ended the Dreamcast. And if anything, you can go into all these other things about exactly what you're saying. These companies aren't the ones preserving this history. The people, 9 times out of 10, the reason we're even able to play these games is because it's on the black market. It's not because the company releasing a dump of 3,000 ISO or ROM files. It's because people are keeping it alive just because they care about the games. So I definitely, that was a bit of an aside, I guess, but I really want to push back against this narrative that piracy is the reason that the Dreamcast failed, because I don't think it has any basis in reality.
No, I don't either. I mean, I remember I was reading that article and I was just really struck by there was almost this weird feeling of it could have been a different way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It could have been how we approach emulation, rights management could have been radically different had Bleem not been sued into oblivion.
Right.
And it's just so sad. But
and it's interesting to think too that apparently, I mean, I only experimented a little bit with Bleem, but they're saying that some games still run really almost better on Bleem than on the native PlayStation protocol. That's a rare thing, obviously, that most of them don't. But that the fact that it reached that level, and that was in a hostile environment. But just and I think it speaks to as well the idea of the companies as victims, the companies which are already Ponzi schemes with the money trickling downwards from the 6 figures at the top, and then the whole concept of that copying something. There was in one of these pieces I was reading, they had a quote from George Bernard Shaw that was if I have an apple and you have an apple and then we exchange it, we each just have one apple. But if I have an idea and you have an idea and we exchange it, we both have 2 ideas. And that the whole debate around MP3s and stealing and all these things is it comes to a head here, where you're seeing people, the vast majority of people who are pirating these games are people who can't afford them or aren't going to buy them anyway. And Are those people actually making a dent in game sales? As I don't think that's the case. And you think about places like Brazil, Mexico, other countries where these gray markets are pretty much the only way people can access games. I mean, if you go down the laundry list, to me, it sounds less and less. It starts to sound more and more like the tiniest violin in the world of the theoretical lost profits. But
yeah, no, I'm with you. I mean, except also getting back into my Saturn recently.
Yeah.
And something that's really interesting with that is you're getting to a point now in terms of like game preservation where I can buy a brand new, complete in-box, factory sealed copy of Panzer Dragoon Saga for probably like, I don't even want to think about how much that would cost. Like maybe like let's say like $700 just because there's probably some lunatic on eBay.
That's preposterous.
Yeah. But it's to a point now where I could buy that, open it, get ready to play it on my Saturn.
Putting the disc in and it like breaks or something.
Yeah, so it's there's a phenomenon called disc rot.
Yeah. Which
is basically where the CDs will begin to actually just almost like decompose essentially, or like just start not working and stuff. So my point is, game preservation is going to come from fans who are dumping ROMs or ISOs and making them available for us to play.
Yeah.
Because it's getting to a point where they're all just going to be broken.
Yeah.
I mean, we're looking way down the line there.
No, but it's true, and I think it's also telling of like, and that was kind of the thing about the Bleem folks is they were arguing way back in the day about like DRM essentially and saying like, you should be able to, like a VHS, the companies should not be able to force you to use like this particular VHS player. You should be able to have this object and watch it on whatever you want to watch it. And it's kind of interesting because we've talked about this as well. Like the whole idea of a console being this exclusive thing is like it's another kind of illusion. It's just licensing fees and clauses and contracts that say that this company can produce this game for this system for 1 year and then they can open it up to other companies. It's not. It has nothing to do with. I think the most salient thing I was taking away from a lot of the copyright stuff I was reading was the argument that copyright and that the reason you need to stop the so-called infringement of copyright, the reason that it seems such a powerful argument and it's such a de facto status quo is because of the basic idea that you're protecting creators. But when you look time and time again about the way it's actually used, is that's not how it's used. It's used to shut down small creators and people doing like their own projects, and then it's used to essentially create these incredibly complex arbitrary ecosystems where like you're saying, Bleem was trying to do this thing, like allowing PC owners to play these games on the PC, and it works. So it's not even a question of the architecture doesn't allow it to happen, but you put a gate in front of that and you're telling people, no, you can't do that, and we're still living the consequence of that now, even though games are ported and there's ways to play games across platforms. The hardware model is, I think the word they were using in the piece was the razor and blades model of like you buy the razor and then you just replace the blades. So they're like the gaming industry is like that, but then they're trying to act like they're not. These things should be interchangeable and they should be able to be used across things. And I think it's even more interesting with the what's happening now with the Steam OS and the Proton thing I was saying before in our chats about now you're getting Linux games, Windows games even more playable on Linux. And what is that going to look like? What is it going to look like when one of the biggest reasons why Windows is a major platform today, besides just market penetration, is taken away because more and more games are able to be played on this other system? I think it's exciting. I think that's awesome.
It's really exciting. Yeah, no, that's awesome.
So yeah. Anyway, forgive my ranting.
No, that's really okay because it does tie in. Because I think you're right in that became a thing after the fact.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, because you're right. I mean, even at the time, you could feel the PS2 coming.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I don't know if people remember or realize if they're younger, just like how much of a hype machine that
Yeah,
was.
yeah.
Like, it's the emotion engine. It's gonna render human faces. It's
Yeah.
gonna. I mean, there was even stuff like it was gonna power like military
Yeah, exactly. It's
hardware, and
gonna
like it was
run
like wild
nuclear
stuff.
subs and shit.
I'm just being like thrown out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just crazy to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's gonna be Metal Gear. That's what it's
Yeah.
gonna be. It's gonna be the Colonel.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's true, and I think that's the other thing we think about is that like the story of a corporation's like series of winding turns and failed strategies and whatever else, like the Dreamcast is their kind of last ditch effort after all these failed attempts. That gets pushed to the side, and then it becomes this like weird, like hand-wringing kind of story about consumers ruining a nice thing. Like, why can't we have nice things? Like it shifts the blame and the attention from the actual, the material processes that make this industry, and to, people feeling certain ways and just I don't feel like paying. Like, I don't know many people. Some of the people who invest the most in games that I know of, because I'm one of them, are people who historically have pirated games. Like I have 15 copies of Final Fantasy VIII. Like I don't even know how many. I don't feel any moral obligation to Square Enix to keep purchasing that game. There's actually a really great piece that I'll link as well. That's a Kotaku piece because of the recent Nintendo, like the bullish anti-ROM stuff that they've been on. They did a survey of like fans, and they had people just like, okay guys, like we all know pirating is wrong, whatever, but they were like, if you pirate, just tell us why you do it. And it's kind of this interesting little slice of life thing where you get like all these different people tons of people responded. And they gave some really interesting reasons, like different people talking about everything we said, from poverty to just like importing games to preservation of games to even like reformed people who are like, I don't do that anymore. So it's a really interesting, it's an anecdotal more than empirical, but it's a really interesting kind of way of talking about this stuff.
Yeah, I'd love to read that. That sounds really good.
Yeah. But so the point of all this was simply to say Dreamcast was an amazing system. It had some critical flaws, but I don't think that piracy was the reason for its downfall. And for me, as a fairly lucky and privileged young person, but still without like a disposable income, I just would. It's a fact. I would not have played any of these games if a cardboard box was not thrust in my face. So
would just burn copies of the game.
Yeah. So I'm gonna finish out this list here before we move on to the next one. We were at Phantasy Star Online is number 5. We've got Soul Calibur number 4, of course. Sonic Adventure 2, and I don't know why I didn't think of this, Skies of Arcadia number 2, which was great.
I played a little bit of it, burned.
Yeah, same. I wish I had beaten it. I never played the re-release on GameCube, really. But I would love it. That was, to me, growing up playing Final Fantasy games, I was like, what? This is what RPGs can be like? Oh my god. So, and from the lack on the N64. And then, of course, number 1 is Shenmue 1 and 2. What I'm actually kind of more interested in is this other list, because I have a feeling you'll have played more of these than I have. But this is the Racket Boy underrated list of hidden gems for the Dreamcast, and I have categories. Okay, so we've got category for platformers, for example. They have the obvious choices. They have Sonic Adventure, Sonic Adventure 2, Rayman 2. That's a great choice. Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver. Their featured game is called Nappletail. Arja in Daydream. This looks like this gives me intense Animu feels, but it's got a kind of Nights into Dreams kind of look to it, 2.5D thing.
Huh.
I'm actually this one actually looks pretty cool to me. So that's for.
Yeah, this looks. I'm on the list right now too.
Oh, so you're
I wanted
looking.
to see
Cool,
that.
cool.
I want to see the aesthetic. Yeah, no, yeah,
That looks
great.
Doesn't that look? Yeah, it looks really cool.
Yeah. Nights is so good.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say that is one that it never got a Dreamcast sequel or anything, right?
No, it got a really really horrible Wii sequel.
Oh no.
That it's like oof, it was rough.
I would have to go back and try that. Is there Saturn emulation on the DC?
No, there's
No.
Saturn emulation on PCs.
Okay,
The
interesting.
Saturn for like years was like the system that you could just never emulate
Oh,
because
okay.
it was like it just has kind of a complicated architecture. It has two processors
Oh,
or
right,
like
right,
four
right, right.
processors that work together. So, but they cracked it. I mean, it runs really well on PCs,
That's
at
cool.
least. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so we got action.
hmm
Alien Front Online. Whoa.
Yeah, that's
What
back
is
online too. I have
Quake
not
with
played that.
tanks? That actually sounds
Yeah,
awesome.
it's a big tank shooter. Yeah,
That sounds great. Um,
yeah.
this actually reminds me, we never even brought up Bomberman Online. That's
Oh
like
my
Super
gosh.
Bomberman Online.
Yeah.
That's like a. I mean, I love Bomberman so much. I played a ton of it growing up. Have really fond memories of the second one in particular, and of the fifth one, which I played when I was in Japan and a lot on emulator with friends. Which to this day I think it's the best Bomberman because you can come back in after you kill people. Well, it was one of the first ones to do that, but Bomberman Online, that I missed the boat on, and I was so bummed because I even at the time I knew what I had missed. I was like, oh wow.
Yeah, just looking at some of the lists underneath here too, there's some really neat ones. Like I picked it up at my game show about a year ago or so. There's a game called Mach-In X, which is really interesting.
Okay, what is that
It's
about?
um it's a first person slasher, so you have a sword. And why it's so interesting was actually one of the only non-Persona games made by the Persona team.
Okay.
So it has like the same aesthetic, it has the same character designers, has the same composer. It's really where you play as a sword that is sentient that
Whoa.
like takes over other human bodies. It actually calls it brain jacking in the game.
Oh wow.
So yeah, so you have like all these different characters. It's really cool. It's also like obscenely hard. I'm like
Okay.
halfway through. Yeah, and I was so annoyed. Like just speaking of technical failures on the Dreamcast, I did this level perfectly after like an hour and a half of trying. Like I just pulled it off, and it got to the end of level cutscene, and it immediately booted to like the startup menu,
Oh
and I was just like,
no.
oh my god,
That
no,
that disc situation was so fragile with the Dreamcast. Like I remember just like
so fragile.
not only did it sound like a truck, like a semi truck, just constantly revving its engine. It like you tap the surface of the thing and it would reboot.
Mm.
So it's notoriously fragile.
Yep.
I'm seeing here Stupid Invaders. This is giving me a kind of a Space Station Silicon Valley vibe. Did you ever play that?
No, I've always wanted to
That
though. I
that's
should
that's an
really.
amazing game. That's one of the unsung heroes of that system. I don't know about this one. It looks awesome though. Um, I'm looking past here. We've got some survival horror section. I don't recognize these games. Um, whoa! You know what? I completely forgot that there was Unreal Tournament and Quake 3 on the freaking Dreamcast.
Yeah, it's really crazy to think about. Yeah, and those are. I'm actually looking at the list of like online games right now.
Yeah.
Those are Quake's back online. I don't think Unreal Tournament is.
Although I gotta be honest, if I was gonna play Quake, it's not gonna be with a controller.
Oh no way,
It's
no way.
gotta be with a mouse. So, but it
Yeah,
is.
absolutely.
I'm glad that the console type's got a glimpse of it. I'm scrolling a bit
Yeah.
more through this list. They got the wrestling category, fighting, other things, racing. Puzzle wise, yeah, you did have the decent. You got Wet Tricks. I played that a bunch. It wasn't. I still think
hmm
Choo Choo Rocket was better.
Definitely.
Bust a Move, Super Puzzle Fighter. These were good. I've never heard of this one. This RPG one, Elemental Gimmick Gear. Have you heard of
Oh
this?
yeah, that was cool. That was yeah, who was that by? Like what developer?
That looks. It actually looks quite. It looks really
It
good.
looks really interesting. Yeah. Um,
This just goes to show how much
yeah.
homework we got to do.
I
Um,
know, like there's so much.
yeah.
Like even just going through the other categories, like yeah,
I,
yeah, like this game Cannon Spike's really weird.
yeah,
The
I see that.
shooters,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
it's
th-
like it's sorry,
no, 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 go for it.
it's by Psycho who did Gunburn 2, and they also did a really weird game on the Switch called Gunbaric or
Okay.
Gunbarich. I don't really know how to say it. It's like it's basically like Breakout or oh my god, Arkanoid,
Oh, okay.
but you have paddles, almost like a
Okay.
pinball, like attached to your like bar, so you can like shoot the ball up basically using these like pinball paddles. It's really weird, but this is a Cannon Spike. It's a top down um, beat 'em up slash shooter. It was published by Capcom, so it has like really random like Street Fighter cameos.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really really bizarre,
That's cool.
and really cool. Yeah,
I think for shmup lovers and for racer people who like racing games also this is I mean that is like a huge blind spot for me, but I've always known people who have been into that stuff, and I think it was just a huge boon. Bangai-O, I totally forgot about that. That was an
yeah,
awesome
me too.
awesome one.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, it does like it lists Mars Matrix here, which you heard in the last one, but yeah, Gumbird, Giga Wing 2.
Hmm.
Um, I'm starting to think that we need to have a little Dreamcast club.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
Is the what is that called? The Dreamcast Raspberry
It's called Dream Pie, but
Dream
there's
Pie.
also a thing called Dreamcast Now, which is basically almost like they almost designed to be like an Xbox Live
Okay,
for it, the service, so you
weird.
can like see who's online. There's
Oh,
like one, there's like one person online now if I check it.
that's
I
awesome.
think it's crazy. Oh, two people online now, and there's 342 total players in this
That's
system.
beautiful. I
It's
love
crazy.
I love struggling but existing online ecosystems.
Me too. Yeah.
um, Yeah, so I'm looking here. I'm actually thinking. I wonder. I'm thinking to myself, what is the state of Dreamcast emulation? Not that I would. I think at this stage, it's probably is just easier to get the system itself. But I'm just trying to think if there's any other these days. The way people have like their RetroArch, these really
Yeah.
complex emulation systems, I wouldn't be surprised. But having said all this stuff about Dreamcast and piracy, I'm actually seriously thinking about, not that I need more systems, but I'm thinking about picking one up and maybe giving it a crack. Because I would love to
Yeah.
play. I would love to play PSO. I would love to play Bomberman Online. I would love to
Hmm.
any of these things. Even Quake. I'll try Quake. I don't mind. It's not going to be a serious attempt, but yeah. Whoa, Echo the
Yeah.
Dolphin. I totally forgot. There was an Echo
Yeah,
the
they brought that
Dolphin for
back. Yep.
yes.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. There's so many. Oh my gosh.
And it is interesting too, because after this era they splintered, and started producing for PS4, for every system, for PS3, PS4, every other system, and they're kind of like always in the background now. Sometimes the runt of jokes, the Sonic series has been crushed to death basically by
Yeah.
them, and tellingly, how was it revived by the
A
mod
fan that they hired.
yeah, a modding, hacking, pirating community that re-injected the life into the series. But
Yeah.
it is crazy to think. I mean, even today, I think it is a generational thing of like, when I see Sonic and Mario in the same game, I kind of I still flinch a little bit because
Oh,
I'm
me
so
too.
used to
Yeah.
thinking of them as separate entities. I even think there was it in the new Smash Brothers Direct thing or one of these things where it was some Nintendo announcement thing where they said we're gonna show people and the Nintendo games they came from or something like that, and then they showed Sonic, and for a second I was thinking like, what doesn't make any sense. What are you talking about?
It's been a while. It's still so weird to me though. I just want to know, I think something really neat about this system is Sega basically restructured all of its developers around the time of the launch of the Dreamcast into kind of like almost like second parties. And I feel like they were all given like a lot of leeway with, the Jet Set Radios, the
Right.
Shenmues, they just kind of let every developer just go wild. And
Yeah.
now all we have is Sonic and Valkyria Chronicles, and I think that's about it.
Yeah, so I think it's telling too because I was reading. I think pretty much the only major company that didn't get on board with the Dreamcast was EA, and I mean they got pretty much everyone else on board. But that was obviously a huge blow. I'm not myself like a huge fan of the EA franchise or the sports games and some of those titles, but that obviously was a huge thing that kept the PlayStation afloat. And something else that I'd forgotten about until I'd read about it was it's obvious, but SquareSoft, the absence of SquareSoft is a big blow in many ways.
Oh, yeah. It's kind of interesting. One of the big things with the Dreamcast were their first-party sports games, which were promoted so heavily, in part because of the loss of EA, that they were trying to almost make up for lost ground with those. And there's this weird kind of phenomenon for about a few years after the Dreamcast died, actually, where people swore that those games were better than the Madden football games or the NBA Live basketball games. And actually, Sega released NFL 2K5 for $20, and then EA bought the rights to the license and shut out Sega from ever developing them ever again.
Oh wow!
So, yeah, that's kind of a weird coda to that story. Like even in like death, after the system years later, they're still like this like zombie force.
I was reading. I can't remember the name of one of the head guys, the guy that was kind of brought on for the Dreamcast effort in America, and that them kind of coming up with this is a post-mortem interview and how they came up with the 2K1 idea. And I didn't even realize, what in my head, I'm so ignorant about sports games that I just 2K1, EA, all that. I kind of was just like, yeah, it's all one big pile. But it's interesting to realize that those are actually just very distinct franchises.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm like, it's football. I don't know.
It's all football. So yeah, I think we're kind of getting towards the end of this episode now. I did want to kind of go over a little bit for some perspective. I mean, we both know that the Dreamcast has its cult status by now, and that if you're a power gamer, you're supposed to like it. And I think we've established that there's a lot more to the console than just the Sonic Adventures and the Power Stones. There's clearly lots of unsung, as I said, classics and stuff like that. But just to give a little bit of perspective about all the perfect storm of things that led to its demise, we talked a little bit about the competition from Sony, from other things. I thought there's actually a really good summary, surprisingly, on the Wikipedia article for the Dreamcast. That the section on the possible reasons for its decline is one of the most well-sourced things I've read in a long time. It's one of those things that nerds make Wikipedia articles longer about the Dot Hack series than events in world history. But
I know it's one of my favorite wrinkles about Wikipedia.
Yeah, but it's there, so I'll link that. But anyway, so what I'm getting at is there's a perfect storm of all the different reasons. But I thought interesting just to think about is that even though, like I was kind of saying, there's this cultural high note for Sega with the Dreamcast kind of pulling themselves out of this bad reputation of the previous years. Also, all things said and done, in terms of actual lifetime sales, I was looking at these charts, and it sold, I think, just shy of 10 million units, which at some lists is one of the worst sold game systems of all time, at least of the major ones. And just for some comparison, I was just, I thought, first of all, you could think about the Switch, which has already pretty much gotten, 20 million units, and it's been out a comparable, a bit less amount of time. The GameCube, which struggled hard, but 21 million.
and then you're talking about the classics, in terms of Nintendo consoles, NES upwards of 60 million, Wii 100 million, and in terms of the PlayStation itself, which was the kind of what Dreamcast had to build on and fight against its whole life. PSX, I believe, recently reached over 100 million in lifetime sales as well. So it just goes to show you kind of that disparity between this stuff. And also on that note, I'm going to link a really good little piece on a small blog about the piracy issue with the Dreamcast that really delves into some of these questions about file sharing, pirate culture, that I think could push us away from this good consumer, bad consumer, endless binary thing, and think more about the kind of symbiotic relationship between piracy and mainstream gaming culture and just media culture in general. But it has some really good charts and numbers, very tasty charts, and it goes into a little bit some interesting arguments, which I think they have to be teased out a bit more about, but actually kind of arguing that piracy and gray markets are some of the ways that companies often break into developing markets as well. So I thought it was another interesting way of thinking about, instead of this binary between the two, what is the way that companies kind of unintentionally or intentionally rely on these fan communities for their own success. So yeah, I will put those links up. But yeah, all things, like I said, all things said and done, I'm really happy to just spend some time in a nostalgia fest about this system. I think I want to go get one, or what did you call it, the Dream Pie?
Oh, the Dream Pie. Yeah, the Dream Pie. Yeah. It's such a crazy invention that just plugging that into the Dreamcast brings it back online after all these years.
Although I was thinking as well about getting the retro Raspberry Pi and kind of doing a retro Pi thing, but I think you were telling me that the DC emulation isn't all there.
Yeah, I think it's like a developmental build. I think it runs, but it runs like super slowly kind of thing. Maybe a few years or something like that, they'll get that going.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I mean, yeah, I love the Dreamcast. I think everyone should go and pirate these games. I don't know. I think you said that it's kind of in a hallowed place in your.
Yeah. So it's currently for like the last year, it's been underneath my PS4 and then across from my Switch in my which feels right on the money to me.
The holy trifecta.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Cool. Well, thanks again, Andy, and I hope let's try and get some more of these little mini episodes out in the future, and keep an eye out for the next regular episode, technically episode 2, coming up probably in a week or 2 weeks' time. And yeah, thanks everyone for listening, and see you next time.
Thank you, Al.
Cool.
We did it.
I know, we did. Let's hope